If you ever thought to yourself that something about Santa Claus just seems a little strange, this magical, pot-bellied, reindeer wrangling, geriatric, climbing down your chimney to eat your cookies and leave you presents, if you ever thought that that was a little bit trippy, you are onto something, because the origins of this holiday icon are stranger than most people would ever imagine. Santa Claus is essentially 1/3 Christian saint, 1/3 Old Norse god, and 1/3 Siberian shaman drinking the bodily fluids of a reindeer that had ingested magic mushrooms. Yeah, you're gonna want to stick around to the end for that part, because when you tell that story at parties, you'll be very popular. But before we get into it, hello, how's it going? How you doing? My name is Kiara. I am a business consultant and startup junkie by day. I am an ordained metaphysical minister by night. So if you're interested in things like comparative religion, mystical traditions, ESP, aliens, declassified secrets, then why don't you ho around and find out more by hitting that subscribe button. And if you're on a holiday kick, if you like a little whiskey in your eggnog, which I don't drink and I'm allergic to eggs, but it was supposed to be a metaphor. If you want more of the holiday stuff, there is a sister video to this one that is all about Christmas and whether or not it is a pagan holiday. And that was published yesterday. And the TLDR version is that Christmas, as we celebrate it today, is the result of a long legacy of cultural exchange between paganism and Christianity, much like the mascot we are discussing today. So let's start with St. Nicholas, because he's the most well-known influence on Santa Claus, and he was a real person, a 4th century bishop in Turkey, who was noted for his generosity. You can think of him as like the patron saint of Venmo, except instead of quick cash transfers, he would throw bags of gold at people's problems. And so one of the most famous stories of St. Nick, probably the most famous story of St. Nick, was the story of a man who had lost all his wealth to the plottings of the devil. And he was a good man, but he could no longer pay for his 3 daughters' dowries. And the way it worked back then as a woman is that you were not sold into marriage, because that's technically what it was. Your option was to literally ho around. So you were either destitution or prostitution. And so Saint Nick came through with a contribution, getting susical up in here, and he threw bags of gold into their house, and legend has it landed in the stockings that they had laid out to dry, which is perhaps where we get that tradition today of filling stockings, although interestingly it also parallels what we see in the old pagan ways. Also, the story of Saint Nick to me just sounds like a Hallmark movie. It's not, it's a true story, bro. I mean, it's a legend, but it would make a good Hallmark film. If it was like an Amazon truck driver and all his colleagues are going on strike, because I'm pretty sure that's what's happening right now, and he was like conflicted between wanting to join with his coworkers and protest their unfair conditions versus like deliver the toys to the little children, and you would have that theme of like billionaire greed and generosity, and I'm getting sidetracked. Anywho, all kinds of stories about Saint Nick that show he was a very generous man, and so he became the patron saint of gift giving and children, also of like repentant thieves and sailors and a bunch of other things, but children and gift giving. And he is still celebrated today in the Catholic denomination, some other denominations. He has his feast on December 6th as part of the Advent, so the month-long celebration leading up to the birth of the Messiah, even though Jesus was probably born in the spring. See that other video. Now, Catholics love their saints, but Martin Luther did not. And so during the Protestant Reform, he basically came out and he was like, y'all, the party's over, go home to your Lord and Savior. He was very frustrated that it seemed like people were paying too much attention to the saints and it was taking the spotlight off Jesus. So he introduced a figure, a new holiday figure called the Christ Kindle, the Christ Child. What do you think that is? Take a wild guess. You would think it would be Jesus, right? Or like sweet baby Jesus. But no, the Christ, I think this is hilarious. The Christ Kindle is like if you took Saint Nick and you placed the TikTok filter that makes someone look like a baby on top of it. Like, his solution to people not paying enough attention to Jesus was to take this kindly old man and turn him into an ethereal glowing munchkin. Anywho, the Christ Kindle became the bringer of gifts in the Protestant regions, but people were also like not wanting to give up their traditions with Saint Nick. They were still attached to that figure, and so they started to merge. And this is what is interesting about Santa Claus, is he is a merging of many different figures, and it got even messier and more delicious when the pagans entered the chat, because keep in mind, around Christmas the pagans are celebrating winter solstice, and they have their own figures associated with that, which brings us to Big Daddy Odin. Odin is the Norse god of war, wisdom, and magic, and he was very much associated with Yule and the winter time, and Yule is one flavor of the winter solstice. And during this time, he would ride in a ghostly procession through the sky on his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, and little children would leave out gifts for Sleipnir, like carrots or hay in their boots, in hopes that Odin would come and leave them a trinket or a gift or something. And already we start to see the parallel with the tradition, the stockings, and Saint Nick. And I, as of right now, have not been able to find a primary source document that would indicate whether that was like an actual exchange or if it's just coincidence that these two traditions are paralleling each other in that way. But suffice to say, that is the prototype for the stockings that we have today. Another thing worth noting about Odin is that his aesthetic got absorbed into the figure we now know as Santa Claus. That like old man look of wisdom and the long white beard is very Odin, the great cloak. And similarly, there was another figure who wasn't necessarily religious, but more archetypal and folkloric, called Old Man Winter. And he is the personification of the season, winter. And he's found all over the world, not just Europe. He's actually found in some Iroquois legends, and he's found in Slavic countries as Grandfather Frost. He can be found throughout Europe as Father Winter sometimes. And similar concepts of, this old man who has this archetypal connection to the season of winter. So we have these different wintry masculine figures who start to come together and meld in the collective consciousness. And then you've got like Sinterklaas in the Netherlands, who was a bishop on a white horse that would give gifts to children. And you have in the Alpine folklore, Krampus, who's like, he's like the satanic doppelganger of Santa Claus. Like if Santa Claus had a dark aspect to his psyche, it would be Krampus, who punishes the bad children. And so because there's so much exchange going on, it becomes very difficult to tell like who got what from who, where, and when. And it's not like clear cuts. It all just kind of comes together in a confluence to the Santa Claus we know and perhaps love, or perhaps have no opinion on today. Okay, so far everything we have talked about is verifiable. Next, we're going to talk about something that is more speculative, but it's still very interesting, and there's some reason to believe that it's a possibility. So some scholars actually believe that Santa Claus has his roots in Siberian shamanism. And if you've been on my channel before, you know what a shaman is, but if you don't know what a shaman is, they are essentially a spiritual leader or guide who bridges the world of our physical senses, of our 5 senses, with the unseen realms. And they'll do this through entering into trance states or altered states of consciousness, can be induced through prayer, meditation, or plant medicine. And so in the case of these Arctic shaman, they would partake in Amanita muscaria, or muscaria, also called fly agaric. I'll put in a picture of it, but it is a type of magic mushroom. If you actually want to see one in the wild, I found one in Alaska. It is in my vlog about Alaska, but needless to say, they would partake in this, and that would put them in a psychedelic state, and it was part of their winter solstice rituals, allegedly. Also allegedly, they would bring spiritual gifts to their people, and sometimes the snow would pile up so high in front of the door that they would have to climb through the chimney-like smoke holes in the top of these structures. And that is all speculative, but what there really is some concrete evidence for, because it's still practiced today, is the reindeer. So the reindeer were sacred to the Sami, which are an indigenous group native to like the northern parts of Scandinavia. And they had this sacred connection with the reindeer. And the reindeer, this comes full circle, the reindeer love the mushrooms. Reindeer will apparently go through great lengths to find, eat, and get high on these mushrooms. And this just so happened to be synergetic with the needs of the shaman, because if a human digests that particular mushroom, it's very hard on the digestive system. It actually can be dangerous if it's not processed correctly. And so instead, they would drink the urine of these high reindeer in order to get those psychedelic effects in a safer way. And that perhaps explains why we have this mythical story of Santa Claus flying through the, like having flying reindeer, because that may have been something from a vision in some kind of shamanic journey, combined with Odin, combined with Christ Kindle, combined with St. Nicholas. So by the time German immigrants are coming over, Christ Kindle has all these elements and it is changed into Kris Kringle, and that is where we start to get the Americanized version of it. The Americanized version really came about with the Coca-Cola campaigns and certain artists like Thomas Nast, and so there's these all this art and this, it was like in the zeitgeist at the time, that painted Santa as this like plump, jolly, happy man in a red suit. And that is how we get the Santa Claus that we have today. However you celebrate the holidays, I hope you are surrounded by people that you love and people who love you. I hope you are laughing and rejuvenating, especially before 2025. I've mentioned this before, but this is going to be a really big year for the collective. And so for that reason, it also feels appropriate to be returning to YouTube, and I feel inspired to make content again. If you want to find more of me, TikTok was my main platform, and I'm really sad to let that go, but it might get banned. It might get banned. But you can also find me on Threads. And I have an Instagram account, but I hate that platform. But if you want to banter, I'm on Threads, and you can find me there. Until next time, stay happy, healthy, and very, very blessed.